All right, so today we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. We're going to do a deep dive on plastic and recycling. And we found this really interesting video that claims to expose the truth about plastic recycling. Have you ever wondered, like, is it really all it's cracked up to be? Or is it maybe a big illusion?
Yeah, it's fascinating how we become so reliant on plastic.
Yeah.
It's like it's everywhere. It's versatile, it's durable, and it's really, really cheap to produce. But I think those same qualities that make plastic so convenient also make it a huge problem.
Yeah, totally. The video actually mentions that 4% of the world oil is used just to make plastic. And it talks about how plastic production really took off during World War II. Like the US government was actually encouraging it
Yeah.
because it was so useful for the war effort. I never really thought about how plastic is like tied to fossil fuels.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's like this legacy of that boom in production that we're dealing with now. We're kind of drowning in plastic. It's filling up landfills, polluting our oceans, it's even ending up in our food. This video talks about these massive plastic garbage patches that are forming in the oceans. Like one of them, the Pacific Garbage Patch. It's 3 times the size of Turkey.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. And one of the things that really blew my mind was learning that like a plastic bottle thrown away back in 1021 would still be around today. Just
Yeah,
imagine that.
absolutely. And it's not just those big visible pieces either. The video also talks about microplastics. Those tiny particles that come from plastic breaking down. They're literally everywhere, even in the placentas of unborn babies.
Yeah.
Kind of scary.
Yeah, that's a little freaky. And speaking of like health risks, the video mentions these chemicals like phthalates and BPA, which are used in some plastics. I've heard they can be harmful. But to be honest, I don't really know much about them.
Well, phthalates are often added to plastics to make them more flexible, but studies have shown that they can be linked to some health issues,
Hmm.
especially in children. And then BPA, or bisphenol A. It's commonly found in like food packaging,
Hmm.
and it can actually disrupt hormones.
So with all these concerns about, plastic and its impact on the environment and our health, you'd think the industry would be like scrambling to find solutions, right? But this video is saying that they've actually been pushing a different narrative, recycling.
Right. The video kind of makes the case that instead of tackling the problem at its root, they've been promoting recycling as this like silver bullet solution.
Yeah. And you know those numbered recycling symbols that are on like every plastic product?
Yeah.
They can be so misleading because they make it seem like all plastic is easy to recycle, which I'm guessing isn't true at all.
Not really. Most plastics can only be recycled like once or twice, if at all. And a lot of the stuff that we throw into those recycling bins actually ends up getting incinerated or in landfills.
Seriously. I had no idea it was that bad. What about all those ads and campaigns telling us to recycle?
Well, it turns out only about 8 to 9% of the plastic collected for recycling actually gets recycled. So it seems like we've been led to believe that recycling is way more effective than it actually is. It's almost like a big sigh.
Okay, so if recycling isn't the answer, then what is? Where do we even go from here?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. It seems like this is way bigger than just like individual responsibility. It makes you think about the role of like corporations
Yeah.
and their responsibility in all of this.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The video actually draws this comparison to the oil industry and how they downplayed the risks of climate change for so long.
Yeah, and the video suggests that both industries have used similar tactics to kind of shift the blame onto individuals while they continue to profit from these practices that are harming the planet.
So they're saying this is like a pattern of corporate deception.
It's a pretty serious accusation.
It is. But if it's true, then it definitely raises some big questions about who's really responsible for this plastic problem and what we can actually do to solve it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the video kind of suggests that maybe the answer is in like rethinking our relationship with plastic completely. It's not just about how we get rid of it,
Right.
but how much we're using in the first place.
So you're talking about reducing our consumption. I'm totally on board with that. But it feels like plastic is everywhere.
Oh, I know. But what if we looked at this as like a design problem? Video talks about how a lot of these products are designed to just be used once, and then we throw them away. And that just keeps the cycle going. Buy used toss. What if we design stuff to last longer? Reusable, easy to fix.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought about it that way. It's kind of like those old milk bottles
Yep.
that they used to collect and sterilize and use over and over. Maybe we need to bring back some of those old ideas.
Totally. And it's not just about the products themselves, it's also about the packaging. Like practically everything we buy comes wrapped in plastic. What if companies started using less packaging
Mhm.
or using materials that are better for the environment?
Yeah, that would be huge. You know, it's funny. When I was a kid, my grandma used to bring her own containers to the butcher shop and the bakery. It seemed a little weird back then, but now I realize she was onto something.
Right. Maybe it's time we brought back some of those old habits. Like the video talks about practical stuff we can do, like bringing our own bags
Yeah.
or using reusable containers and water bottles.
Yeah. I've been trying to do more of that, but it feels like no matter how hard I try, I still end up with a ton of plastic waste.
I feel you.
Uh,
And sometimes plastic is just unavoidable. But that's where being a smart consumer comes in. Remember those numbered recycling symbols we were talking about? They can actually be useful, if you know what they mean.
right. Remind me about those numbers again.
Okay, so different plastics get different numbers,
Yeah.
from 1 to 7. Some are easier to recycle than others, like
Yeah.
the numbers 1 and 2. Those are PET and HDPE. They're usually recyclable.
Okay. So I should look for those numbers when I'm shopping. What about the other ones?
It's best to avoid numbers 3 and 6. Those are PVC and polystyrene. They can be really bad for the planet, and potentially even for us.
Hold on. PVC. That's what they use for pipes, right?
Yep. And while it's really durable for stuff like that, it can release harmful chemicals. And it's almost impossible to recycle.
Wow. The things you learn. Okay, so what about the rest? 4, 5, and 7.
4 and 5 are generally considered safe, but they're not always easy to recycle. And 7 is kind of a mixed bag. It's often used for stuff like water bottles, which can contain BPA.
Okay, so that's a lot to keep track of. It's like a whole secret code on my food containers.
I know.
But I guess it's worth it if it means making better choices.
Exactly. It's about being aware of what we're buying, understanding what it means, and taking responsibility for the impact we have.
And the video also talks about how we need like a bigger change, not just individual actions. It's about holding corporations accountable and getting the government to create better policies.
Yeah, totally. We can't just rely on individuals to solve a problem this big.
It's like we're being told to clean up this mess, while these big companies keep making more and more plastic.
Exactly. We need to fix the root of the problem, not just deal with the consequences. That means getting companies to change how they make things, making sure there are stricter rules, and supporting policies that prioritize the environment over profits.
And the video actually highlights some cool examples of that happening already, like banning single-use plastics, or coming up with new ways to package things that are reusable, and even creating new materials that can biodegrade.
Yeah, there's definitely a movement happening.
It feels like more and more people are waking up to this plastic crisis.
For sure, and they're demanding better.
It's like that saying, think globally, act locally, we can all do our part. Support businesses that are trying to be sustainable, reduce how much plastic we use, and talk to people about it.
Exactly. And don't underestimate how much your voice matters. Contact your representatives. Let them know you care about this. And demand that they do something. Support the organizations that are working to fix this. Every little bit helps.
You know, this whole conversation has really made me think about my own habits. I'm going to be way more mindful about the plastic I use.
Me too.
It's crazy how much we just take it for granted.
I know. And the more we learn about what it's really costing us, the more we realize that the convenience just isn't worth it.
So what's the takeaway here? What's the one thing we want our listeners to remember from this deep dive?
I think the main message is that we can change things. We can create a future where plastic isn't destroying our planet and making us sick. It starts with realizing there's a problem, understanding how the system works, and then doing something about it, both on our own and together.
It's about going beyond just recycling and finding a better way to deal with this plastic problem. We need to use less, demand more from the companies that make this stuff, and push for policies that put the planet first.
Yeah, and it's about remembering that we're not alone. There are so many people and organizations and even companies that are working to create a better future.
It's about joining that movement, speaking up,
Mm.
and demanding a world where plastic is the solution, not the problem.
Well said.
So to everyone listening out there, we hope this deep dive has given you something to think about, and maybe even inspired you to take action. Remember, every choice you make, every action you take, can help create a healthier planet for us and for future generations.
Yeah, it really feels like all these things are connected. Our habits, the companies, what the government does, it's all part of this big plastic mess.
It's definitely a complicated system, but I think one of the biggest problems is this idea that it's all on us. Like, reduce, reuse, recycle, that's important. But it also kind of takes the pressure off the people who are really responsible.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're telling us to clean up their mess
Yeah.
while they just keep making more and more plastic.
It's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon.
Totally.
We need to fix the system, not just try to deal with the symptoms. That means holding these corporations accountable, making sure there are strong
Yeah.
regulations, and supporting policies that actually put the environment first. Yeah, the video actually gives some good examples of things that are already happening, like banning single-use plastics, or finding new ways to package stuff that can be reused, and even developing new materials that can break down naturally.
Yeah, there's definitely some positive movement happening.
It feels like more and more people are realizing how bad this plastic problem is.
Yeah, and they're starting to demand change.
It's like that saying, think globally, act locally. We can all do our part, support businesses that are trying to be sustainable, reduce how much plastic we use ourselves, and talk to people about it.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate how much your voice matters.
Right.
Contact your elected officials. Let them know this is important to you. Support those organizations that are fighting for change. Every little bit helps.
This whole conversation has really got me thinking about my own habits. I'm going to be a lot more careful about the plastic I use.
Yeah, me too.
It's amazing how much we take this stuff for granted.
I know. And the more you learn about the real cost of plastic, the more you realize it's just not worth it.
So, what's the main message here? What do we want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think it's that we have the power to change things. We can create a future where plastic isn't destroying our planet.
Yeah.
And it starts with understanding the problem and then taking action, both individually and together.
Yeah, we can't just rely on recycling. We need to find a better way to deal with plastic. Use less of it. Demand better from the companies that make it. And push for policies that prioritize sustainability.
Exactly. And remember, we're not in this alone. There are so many people and organizations and even companies that are working towards a more sustainable future.
So it's about joining that movement, speaking up, and demanding a world where plastic is the solution, not the problem.
Well said.
So to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about and maybe even inspired you to take action. Remember, every choice you make, every action you take makes a difference. Let's create a healthier planet together.